It's the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. For more on the Seminoles, including Osceola's coverage from veteran Seminole insiders, message boards, Osceola virtual happy hours, and more, go to theosceola.com. And right now, enter the code FSU20 and get 20% off your annual subscription. That's FSU20.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines podcast. My name is Patrick Burnham. I'm a football writer for the Osceola and the host of today's podcast. Joining me today to talk about FSU's 52-10 loss to Miami on Saturday night are Osceola publisher Jerry Kutz, Osceola editor Bob Ferrante, Osceola football analyst Mark Salva, who played offensive line at Florida State, and veteran college football coach Wally Burnham, who spent 50 years in college football, including 9 as a linebackers coach at Florida State for FSU's Bobby Bowden. Guys, welcome to the show, and of course we've got a lot to cover coming off a 42-point loss by the Seminoles to the Miami Hurricanes, so let's get started. All right, guys, it couldn't have gone much worse for FSU going to Miami last night. It started a week early with head coach Mike Norvell getting sick with COVID, not being able to make the trip, and got worse from there. Miami had their way with Florida State last night. We'll get into a little bit on offense and defense momentarily, but want to go through the panel and ask you guys kind of what your first impressions are of the game, the thing that most concerns you, and then one thing that you took out of the game as a positive. And Mark, I'll start with you. Well,
I think the thing that continues to concern me the most is our lack of offensive identity. Looking at it on the whole, it looks like we just don't know where to go or what something we can rely on or something that, what is it that we do? When you think of FSU offense, what do you think of? And we just don't have an identity. And that's my biggest concern. The positive thing I saw a lot of things that could be correctable. I mean, I know it was ugly, and I think the mistakes just compounded on each other, especially in the first half. But most of the mistakes that I saw, and when I went back and studied it, were things that I think can be coached. Outside of the left tackle getting beat one-on-one with bad technique, and then it was only the one time. He was pretty good for the most part every other time one-on-one with that guy. Most of the sacks were either busts or lack of understanding of the scheme, the protection, where your help is coming from, who you should be helping, that kind of thing. So Those things could be corrected, and it's part of the process that we're going to have to endure as this team grows, and of course identifying guys that will compete and fight and guys that just, to be blunt, are not the answer. Coach Burnham, what was your the biggest thing that you've seen over the last 2 weeks that concerns you about this football team, and what was one positive you're taking away from the Miami game?
Well, the thing I saw that we're still being dominated at both sides of the line of scrimmage. There's no doubt about that. I was real disappointed in the defensive line that they didn't compete and be more physical, and so I think they got a long way to go in that area. I think it might be personnel. And the other thing that I was encouraged by, I think I saw Amari Gaynor doing a really good job. He's all over the field. He's competitive. I really liked his attitude, the way he competes. Samuels had I thought, a pretty good game. He was tested a couple of times and came out pretty good, but he does compete. You can tell by his demeanor. And then the guy that I kind of noticed and I didn't know about was the safety, Travis Jay. I know he got a couple of guys behind him, but he was able to catch up and do some things like that. And but I was encouraged by those 3 guys, probably more than anyone else on defense.
Bob, what was your biggest concern coming out of the Miami game, and what was the one positive you're taking away from the Miami game?
Biggest concern was the 3 starting receivers. Tamari and Terry get shut out. Warren Thompson gets shut out. Keyshawn Helton 1 catch for 2 yards. How can you have 3 starting receivers and that's one catch for 2 yards. That's no production, regardless of the defense and how they're attacking and trying to shut down Terry. You just can't have that. I did think, looking at positives, and I realized the game was way out of control at that point, but you saw a lot of freshmen play late and have some good kind of productive film to review this week, from quarterback, running backs, receiver. Toafili again jumped out as a guy who you think is a building block for the program. Preston Daniel at tight end. So there are guys there that you think are part of the future and part of this rebuild.
Jerry, what about you? What was your one concern coming out of the Miami game, or thing that concerns you most moving forward? And what is the one positive you're taking away from the Miami game?
I would identify with what Mark Salva said, that we really don't have an identity on offense. And I think that has to do with the quarterback position. I mean, I don't know that you can really do a lot when your quarterback, when you can't figure out exactly what he can do. And I think one of the positives, I guess, coming out of that game is I looked at what Manny Diaz did in the portal. And I think the portal becomes our best friend. It's a way for you to process some kids that really don't want to be here or aren't giving you the effort that you need. And, Manny brought in 7 players that are extremely good. The 2 defensive ends, the safety, the tight end, the quarterback, the left tackle, and the kicker. Man, when you can improve 30% of your team in 1 year, that's the ticket to the future, I think, for Florida State. I think you got to recruit high school kids, but I saw in what Diaz did the way out of this mess.
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to hit the transfer portal this year. I'm not sure it's the way you build a program long term, year in and year out, but certainly to get this corrected right away. Of course, they're going to have to win some games to attract some of these transfers, so they still got some work ahead of them there. For me, I think it's going to be the penalties. The penalties were just added towards salt on the wounds. They were undisciplined on defense, a lot of personal foul penalties, and obviously had a crucial illegal procedure penalty on the first drive that took away a chance to go for a touchdown. There were several more that crept up, but the penalties. And, of course, one thing that I did like, obviously, Bob mentioned the young kids. I like the way Rodemaker came back and responded after he threw that interception. He completed 4 of his last 5 passes. And then, of course, Toafili looked good throughout the game, and then Travis Jay, obviously, and Amari Gaynor. So the young kids are the kids that are flashing week in and week out, not the older kids. And, of course, now I kind of want to go to each side of the ball. Coach Burnham, I want to start with you. The defense continued its unspectacular play again on Saturday night. Gave up 20 plays of 10 yards or more, over 517 yards of offense. And looked like they came out and were going to play coverage. Lined up in a lot of a 3-man front. We're dropping 7 and 8 and still couldn't get the job done on defense. What did you see from Adam Fuller's defense, and what was he trying to do, and why were they struggling to get it done?
Well, I was real surprised at the 3-man front, to be honest with you. I thought they would line up in a 4-man front and try to, stop the run a little bit better than they did. I'm not there with those guys just like you guys are not. We don't see them every day. But the 3-man front, they knew they weren't going to get any pressure. Especially the personnel they had in there, those 3 big guys, there's no way. Plus you got double teams and everything else on 2 of them. And so, they didn't worry about the pressure. Miami didn't. So I was real surprised at that. Then the next thing that kind of jumped out at me was, okay, you're going to give them time to throw the ball. We're going to cover everyone. And they didn't do that either. So, that was really, really stood out to me. What they did, 5 TDs on the first 5 possessions, 2 of them passing, and the passing got them down into the red zone. That's when they turned that big back loose. and they certainly couldn't stop him. He's a really good football player. And so, you know, I think I read where Miami averaged 6.4 yards per play. You know, they are way ahead of the chains now. And the defense is way behind. And so, you know, that's the thing that I saw again. The defensive front is not physical. They're not playing. They might be physical kids, but they're not playing physical. And I don't know whether that's them or the style of defense they're playing, but they got to get more physical or at least move around, fill an opposite gap. I don't know, you know, but they've got to, you know, get somebody that can make some plays. You know, and I think, you know, they could have probably doubled the score or at least put about 20 more points on the board. But at the middle of the second quarter, the game was over as far as the defense is concerned. You know, they weren't competing as a whole. I mean, I know they had some people. You know, I mentioned 3 guys earlier. And I think those guys, now I'm sure there were others. You know, I can't watch, you know, no one can watch all 11 at a time during the game. I haven't had a chance to look at the game. So anyway, I was surprised. The game was over early. We didn't compete like I was hoping we would against Miami. That game used to make your hair stand up on the back of your neck, you know, and I don't think any of those kids' hair was standing up on the back of their neck. And so anyway, that was kind of my feeling after the game.
All right,
Well,
go ahead, Mark.
I was going to ask, Wally, do you think, you know, a thought occurred to me as I was watching that with the 3 down linemen. Do you think this was a case of where Kando not being available, Fuller not being real effective last week, Griffiths being a really young guy, that he just said, I'm trying to get my best 11 on the field, and this is the best way for me to do it?
Could be, you know, it very well could be. But, you know, those 2 big inside guys, Mark, they cannot rush a passer.
No.
So you're giving up the passing game when you do that. And maybe that's the way they felt. Best way to win is give up the pass. But, you know, like we were talking earlier, they were letting people that were lined up 5 yards deep set the edge of the defense. Hell, that's hard to do on the line of scrimmage. You know? That's right. So anyway,
I agree. I'm just trying to think. You know, was that his thought process and lining up that way?
Could be.
You know, but obviously after the first drive or second drive, anyways, you got to say, okay, this isn't going to work, because you know, the other thought was, well, maybe they misevaluated King and his ability to throw the football. That they thought, well, if we contain him and you know, we put our best 11 on the field and, you know, try to make the windows tight, maybe he can't do it, but obviously they could.
Well, here's the other thing. If you're going to line up in a 3-man front, you got to blitz some outside backers. You got to blitz some inside backers. Run stunts, if you want to make it run stunts, that's fine. If they throw in the ball, you might break through too. You know, at least you'll keep somebody in and maybe help it. But anyway, that was my feeling on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, there's no doubt they're not getting production out of the interior defensive line. That's for sure. That's been very disappointing, and I think part of the woe is your best player is not giving you his best performances, and I think he and Corey Durden don't have a lot of stamina, to be quite honest with you, and it's affecting their play. You know, they've basically run 2 different defenses against Georgia Tech and Miami. You got Jacksonville State rolling in here Saturday, a middling team at the FCS level, 6-6 last year. Then the schedule gets pretty hard. You got to go to Notre Dame, come back home to 11th ranked North Carolina team, then back on the road to Louisville, which is struggling right now, then back home to a ranked Pitt team. Where, if you're in Adam Fuller's shoes, Coach Burnham, what are you doing getting ready for the rest of the conference schedule?
Well, I think he's got to decide on some personnel. Again, like you say, we're not there every day like they are. But I think personnel's got to be – they got to sit down as a defensive staff and say, all right, these are our best 11 players, and figure out what they can do. And then they got to figure out what scheme that will cover, what they trying to accomplish against these offenses. Everybody runs the same offense anymore. I mean, it's the spread, it's the zone read, it's the counters, it's the power, all those kind of things, and some reverses and the quick screens and the flats, and it's all the same. So they just got to figure out, to me, how they can reach that point where they can go out there with the 11 best, and we're about the next 11 after that, and be a little competitive, more competitive overall. All 11 of them, playing and having their hair on fire, so to speak. But they got to get them to that point somehow to get their hair on fire.
Agreed.
All right, before we move to the offense, Bob and Jerry, do y'all have any thoughts on the defensive performance last night, or what you think about them moving forward?
The only thing I would add is, not to make excuses, but this group is going to look different, hopefully better, when you get Kendo back, when you get Hamza Nasruddin back. We saw, Kendo did try to warm up and did not play. Hamza warmed up and then changed back out, so it was clear he was either trying or something. He might be getting close. It's a sign of optimism that he made the trip and at least tried it. So I feel like if you're looking for something, you're going to probably get two of those guys back in the near future. Just a real question of when.
All right, well, Mark, let's move over to the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, you mentioned in our opening that you're concerned about a lack of offensive identity. Florida State struggled to do much of anything offensively, although they found some success in the run game. They were a little bit more dedicated to it against Miami than they were Georgia Tech, and actually had all three running backs, two of the running backs, Corbin and Toafili, averaged over 7 yards per carry, which is a big positive for Florida State. Jordan Travis averaged 7.5 yards per carry, and of course the quarterbacks, all three of them, were negative in yardage. But anyway, so the running back game was a little bit better. But Mark, you found success on offense late when the game was really over. Where do you go from here on offense if you're Kenny Dillingham and Mike Norvell?
That's a great question. The first thing you got to settle on is the quarterback and what you ask him to do. That is obviously a major point of contention. And, James has had 2 games now under this regime, and he obviously is limited in for whatever reason, on what he can do for this offense. His accuracy is not great. He bails early. He locks in on guys. And it's easy sitting back here the day after and say, oh, we just got to get rid of him. Because if you do, you make that move, then you're committing to something that, you're probably not going to get him back. And if he does have to play, it's not going to be very effective. So you got to be really, really sure if you make that move. That's number one. You got to that's got to get settled, because then everything else will kind of dictate to how we can proceed forward as an offense. I think we need to rely collectively more on the offense as a whole rather than being so quarterback centered, and that means an effective running game. Now, the running backs did look good in spots, and there were some really well executed running plays, but Miami quit doing a lot of this, the stuff, about halfway through the second quarter. A lot of that happened against a base defense.
Yep.
But when they were slanting and twisting and, bringing guys off the edge, it really, threw some confusion. So the other thing you got to do is, just really coach off this film, really drill down. And, I think our base offensive linemen, maybe, I think our base offensive line has some potential, outside maybe one guy. All right. And I think if we continue to coach them and to give them an understanding of what it is they're trying to do, so they can adjust on the run, adjust on the field, react correctly, because most of the plays that get blown up, it's because of the bad reaction, bad training, in terms of maybe not enough. And, rarely was it a purely physical mismatch, in my opinion, All
right, now we saw, obviously, Darius Washington, Dante Lucas, and Maurice Smith, three young linemen who we thought were going to help improve this offensive line. They played against a much better defensive front last night than they did against Georgia Tech. What are your thoughts on the three young linemen as far as what you've seen from them and what you expect to continue to see?
I think with young linemen, you got young lineman mistakes. You had lapses in assignments. You had lapses in technique. You had but you see some ability there. Even with Lucas, when he got his hands on somebody, he was relatively effective. I think of those three, he's the one that has the biggest gap right now in understanding what it is they're trying to do. You see him not, covering for Washington on zones. You see him in pass protection getting locked in and not blocking his responsibility. You saw that a little bit with the other guys too, but with him it kind of stuck out. So those are young guys. Those guys that have some ability that I think can be good for us. And we're seeing what you have when you play with freshmen and redshirt freshmen.
All right, I got a question for both Mark and Coach Burnham. Obviously, as we've spoken about a ton and written about a ton heading into this game, Mike Norvell was not there. Kenny Dillingham, who has 3 years of on-field coaching experience at the college level, was tasked with making in-game adjustments from the box. I don't think you can. I think Mike Norvell not being there was a huge difference in what happened on the offensive side of the ball. Am I overstating that? He's considered one of the brightest young minds in the game. Was not there to make adjustments. Am I making too big a deal about his absence from the offense?
I'll go first, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's what I think about that situation was this. If he had been there and the game had started getting away like it did, the same circumstances would have happened. He would have had a different call game. I think they put that game plan together, and it's probably a good game plan. But when the ball game got away from him, I think Coach Norvell would have changed it somehow and said, look, we're going to take our lump. We're going to run the ball more. We're going to do this and kick it, punt it, whatever, and try to get field position, try to make them, those kind of strategies is what I think the difference was, him being there or not being there.
Yeah, I agree, Wally. I'm real big on complementary football, right? And so with the defense struggling, I'll give you a great example is we got the turnover in the second quarter and immediately tried to run a double reverse pass, and through the interception, gave the ball right back. When I think of complementary football, I think, okay, defense is struggling. We caught a break on the punt, on the muff punt, and we've got to capitalize on this. What's our best play? Not how can we get 6 right now, but if Norvell's there, his thought process is probably what's our best play to get in front of the change and try to sustain something, give our defense a break, and generate some points to get us back in this ball game. But instead, we ran a double reverse. Try to run a double reverse pass where we've already established that 13 is going to be a playmaker for us. And when he's lined up we were in a power set with him wide, a single receiver goes in motion. Everybody on the defense eyes went to him. Right. And so, that's an example of maybe where that might've been different if Coach Norvell was there. And, it goes back again to what is our offensive identity? What are we going to, what's our go-to? What's our bread and butter in that situation, especially with the defense struggling? That's where you go to your bread and butter. Now, to quote Wally Burnham, hindsight's 50-50, right? Because if they pull that play off for whatever reason, then all of a sudden he looks like a genius, right? But that was a risk that at that point was probably unwarranted.
Okay. All right, well, guys, Florida State is 0-2 heading into the Jacksonville State game. And when we had this discussion earlier about all the scenarios that could possibly work out as FSU went through the season, I had told you guys, it wasn't in a podcast, but just in a regular conversation, that I was not for going to a youth movement early in the season. I wanted to see what this team can accomplish. Obviously, there are some liabilities with some of the veterans on the roster. And Bob, is it time for the youth movement to begin at Florida State, particularly as it pertains to quarterback, offensive line, linebackers, and I guess you can make an argument that maybe some of the younger defensive linemen need to play more. But does that need to start with Jacksonville State?
Short answer is yes. I think every position, not just a cliche, is up for grabs, but it truly is when you're 0-2 and you're in the middle of a season that is a rebuild. I've argued that, for weeks, all 4 quarterbacks should play against Jacksonville State. Let it have an NFL preseason game feel. I know a lot of people will probably roll their eyes and say it's not what you should do, but when you're trying to see which of your 4 quarterbacks can be productive, develop, and learn, and maybe get you in position to win games, that's how you figure it out, is you put them on the field on a Saturday. So I agree. It's time to put guys out there who are productive in practice, who seem to feel like they've gotten the system and the scheme and what you're doing. And if you're not confident in them yet, by no means don't put them out there just because they're a freshman and they're new. But I think this coaching staff, after the prolonged summer camp and now 2 games plus the extra bye week, you have a feel for who you think can help you out there on Saturdays.
Mark, what about on the offensive line? Do you give, Robert Scott and Thomas Schrader got their first snaps of the season late in the game? I'm not saying they should start, but do you start integrating those guys into the offense more based off what we've seen for a couple of the older guys 2 weeks into the season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to see what these guys have. I think, and this is a great situation to do it. I'd at least let them get half the snaps, And now, that being said, we have to win this game. We have to do whatever we need to do to win this game. I mean, I'm not taking it for granted for sure. But to that end, though, if we do need to see what these guys bring to the table, and this is probably the best chance we have to do that.
Coach Burnham, Amari Gaynor looks like the best player on FSU's defense as a young redshirt freshman or sophomore. I'm sorry, but Steven Dix, number 32, flashes from time to time at middle linebacker. Is it time to get those young linebackers more reps in these ball games?
Probably so. I agree. Dix is 32, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. He caught my eye early. And of course, Amari, every time the camera went close to him, he was, giving it everything he got and trying to strip balls and things like that. And so I think at some point, and this is a good week to do it, give them a lot of reps in practice and then put them out there and see if they can compete at that level, and don't try to win the game 100-0 and have false hope. Play the guys that practice hard this week, whoever that is, that practice hard.
Jerry, you got any thoughts on the youth movement? What you think ought to happen?
Yeah. I think what you got to do really, first of all, is sit down with your older guys and, we have a good conversation with them. And if you don't feel, based upon what you've seen on film, and if you don't like their effort, and it's, as Mark likes to say, if they're capitulating, I think you got to move on. And I've been making a few phone calls today. I talked with Joe Camps, who was the defensive captain on that 76 team, when Bobby made the big youth movement. Joe and I talked probably for an hour about it, and I talked with Gladden and some other guys that were involved in that at that time. And we had gone down to Miami in Bobby's first year, 76, and we got beat 47-0. And when they got back to Tallahassee, he said to the coaching staff, if we're going to get beat, let's get beat with young guys who can help us build a program. And so they started a couple of guys on defense and a couple of guys on offense, went out and played Oklahoma, who was ranked, I think, 3rd or 4th in the country, into the fourth quarter. They got beat in the fourth quarter. But what Joe said that I think is significant to this conversation is that, now remember, those seniors had come off of 0-11, 1-10, 3-8. And very much like this team, they'd gotten used to losing. And what had happened was guys were given maybe 60, 70%. Guys were getting like dinged and sitting in the training room and missing practice and not doing, 100% effort. And you're better off with a young guy who's giving you full effort than you are with a guy who that was Joe's thoughts. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that. But, Jim thought that if your guy can go through practice, if he can watch film as a freshman, if he can learn his assignments, and you can put in a defense that is simple enough for a freshman to wrap his head around and play at 100%, you're probably better off. And I think that's where we're at. I think we've got to really decide which of these guys want to play hard and which guys have just they've thrown in the towel, emotionally. And that's only the coaches know that. I certainly don't. But I believe these coaches know that. And I believe their teammates know that.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on that. And I'm not sure that's not the way they should go. Like I said, I was hoping that, we'd be a little bit more successful coming out of the gate. I didn't think there was any guarantee that we'd beat Miami, to be sure. But I certainly did not think it would be what it turned into last night. And I think that maybe you're going to have to start looking hard at playing some younger kids that are deserving of it. All right, well, guys, Jerry, this question is more for you because obviously, you talked to a lot of fans and have talked to a lot of fans since last night. We are 2 games into the Mike Norvell era. What are your thoughts on what this team and staff have shown compared to what you expected coming into the season? And what do you think, or what are you hearing is the sentiment of the majority of FSU fans that you're talking to after 2 games about this team?
Well, I'm speaking for me. I'm totally surprised on the defensive side of the ball. And I don't know what to think. I mean, I look at I watched 2 games and not having the benefit of watching practice or really doing one-on-one interviews with coaches. I really don't quite understand what they're trying to do on defense, as Wally said. And so I'm just shocked by the defense. I expected it to be much different than what it is. Offense, I'm not so surprised. I mean, this is just more of the same problems. I mean, listen, college football, if you've got a great quarterback, you can do a lot of things. You can make an offensive coordinator look good. But when you got a quarterback that really struggles, your offense is going to be what it is. And then as far as what the fans, it's funny in talking, and I think Joe Camp sort of, and I hate to use Joe again, but it sort of encapsulates it. Joe's been watching football 45 years. He was the captain and safety of our defense in '76. And he said, I don't know. I just don't know. I look at the team and I don't know. And Joe, to be fair, he just kept wanting to be fair. And certainly there's first-year head coaches out there that are having success. But, he's looking at the COVID and missing spring practice, and he just wants to be fair. And I think most of our fans feel that way, that, hey, this is extenuating circumstances. It's unacceptable. Other head coaches are having success. Why not us? And, very disappointed, very surprised. I think that's the 2 sentiments I hear the most.
Anybody else got any thoughts on, their expectations versus what has happened in the last 2 weeks?
Jerry, I think what you're alluding to about first-year coaches having success, I watched that Mississippi State game.
Gave me hope.
But the thing about it was, and I've never really drilled down on Leach very much, and I watched that whole game, and I was so impressed that they lined up one way pretty much the whole game with some slight variations, core wides and doubles. And they ran variations on the same 4 or 5 plays the whole game. In other words, those kids knew exactly what to do, where to be, on the same page, protection-wise, route-wise, quarterback-wise, the whole thing. And, I guess what I'm saying is I know our guys are smart, or else they wouldn't be where they are. I'm a little surprised that, again, going back to our offensive identity and probably defense too, is that there doesn't seem to be a base of operation, either structurally or, inventory of plays and stuff like that. That's the thing that surprises me more than anything.
Well, Bob or Jerry, anything more to add on that? Okay. All right. Well, one of the great things about college football, and it's happening everywhere, and it's happening from Baton Rouge to Columbia, South Carolina to Tallahassee, Florida. Every Sunday we got to sit down and we have to adjust what we think about our teams and about college football. We've got 2 games of evidence about what Florida State can do. We've seen what their opponents have done over the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. Now we have to readjust what we think about this program, and we're sitting here 0-2 moving forward with this season. From a record standpoint, guys, I'm going to put you on the spot. From a best-case scenario, what are you expecting moving forward?
I've got Florida State bowl eligible, guys. Bowl eligible. That's my answer. How do you like that?
All right.
You might want to explain that. Let Bob explain what he means by that.
Congratulations, Bob. They're already eligible.
It's September, and there's no worries. They're going to be playing in December or January. It's
if we want to.
The NCAA legislation is going to push forward that everybody can play in a bowl regardless of record, and it's going to be likely approved in October. So I joke that regardless of the record, Florida State gets that developmental time. I'm not sure what this win-loss record is looking like. I think you look down that schedule and you start to fear how many losses are ahead. But I think you also start to see some 50-50 games that you got to, to use your term, you got to outcoach some boys, and you got to get some wins.
Yeah, we talked about that before. At some point, I think it's going to be up to the coaches to pencil whip the other staff and get these kids believing in what they're doing. And I think it's got to happen in the next 3 or 4 weeks myself. I don't know who that comes against, whether it's Louisville or Pitt or maybe even North Carolina. I've got my concerns about Notre Dame after watching them last week. But anyway, I think it's going to be a very interesting season. I think they can still – I still think they'll get better as the season moves along, but certainly didn't think what was going to happen Saturday night was going to happen. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just going to say, you said it when you said you have to adjust, what success looks like for this team. I think, in the last couple of years, I think we saw us regress during the course of this season. I think for me, I can see evidence of progression a little, and unfortunately it just may not manifest in the win-loss column.
Right. I agree. I agree with that.
And if we continue to grow, if we start identifying, for lack of a better term, winners and losers, on our team, put them in the right places, just start adjusting the scheme, start, figuring out what we can do and what do we need to do to be productive. If we just keep making steps in that direction, I think that's what our lens is going to have to be, whether or not this season is successful or not, because honestly, looking down that schedule, it's hard today, the day after the Miami game where they scored 50 points and we could barely put up 10. It's hard to see where the wins are going to come.
Yeah.
So you just hope we get the right people in the right places. We just get better, and maybe towards later in the year we'll be a lot more competitive against some teams that personnel-wise we can match up better against.
Yeah, and I do think that's going to be the case. Now, Coach Burnham, I want to throw it back to you. We'll do more Jacksonville State previews later in the week. But obviously, you're a veteran over 550 college football games. What are you looking for if you're the staff at Florida State? What are you looking for out of your team at the Jacksonville State game, which you should be favored by a lot by?
Well, improvement in all areas, naturally. I think they have got to do some of the things that we've been talking about. They got to get depth so they can play more people and those kind of things. And I think they'll come out and probably, put a bunch on Jacksonville State. And I think it shouldn't be close personnel-wise. And so I think they'll handily win that football game.
Jerry, I do want to ask you one final question, and we'll wrap this up for today. But, Miami, Florida State, generally down there in Miami, it's a pretty wild atmosphere because of COVID. Obviously, it was not. What was it like at Hard Rock Stadium with only 13,000 fans there?
Other than the football game, it was fabulous. You had no traffic getting in or out. The Miami fans that were, that was their premium people that were able to buy tickets to that game, and so you didn't have the riffraff, that tends to come to those games, right? So it was easy to get in and out. And people were very pleasant. Which really hurts when Miami people are nice to you after a game. They felt bad for us. But
that's awful.
The stadium was immaculate, and it was an easy day. It was very easy to go to the game, and get around the stadium and get out of the parking lot. There was no trash in the parking lots because there was no tailgating. And it was a little weird, but it was pleasant.
Well, I guess the good thing about this week, guys, is that it's over. It's been a long week. The game was not well played, obviously, and then it was not made any easier by the fact that the head coach was missing, and hopefully he'll be back to work on Monday. But I want to thank you guys for your time. I do think that we'll be having more positive conversations as the season moves along, and look forward to getting together later in the week to talk a little bit about the Jacksonville State Gamecocks and any late breaking news from the week with the Florida State football team. But Bob and Jerry, drive safe on your way back to Tallahassee. And Mark and Coach Burnham, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah.
Take care, Pat.
This has been another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. To subscribe to the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. And right now, enter the code FSU20 and get 20% off your annual subscription. That's FSU20. Go Noles!